Hello everyone and welcome to the Game Engine programming series where I write a game engine from scratch. In the last video, which was a blue episode, we started working on the look of the level editor. And right now we have this dark theme that we can use with the editor, and we made also some nice animations that go with it. However, the list boxes and the buttons have still their original look that doesn't really fit with the rest of the design, of course. So I'd like to continue today and change the look of these elements as well. And then we can step ahead and go to the main window. When we do the list boxes and the buttons, then this part will automatically be changed to the new design as well. And don't worry about the dark background right now, because all we see is the background of the window itself. We will put user controls in there anyway with their own background, lighter background color. So for example, this history tab and log tab will have their own background colors, of course. And I'll be changing these buttons. Alright, I'd like to start by defining a new look for the buttons, and therefore just go back to Visual Studio in the control templates, the XAML file. And here earlier we did this simple button that we are using in the Windows style, the 3 buttons on the top right of the window. And I'm going to make another style that will be applied to all the buttons in the application. So if I would write a style right here, then I can't really see what the button looks like right away. I'd like to see what I am designing, and then I can just go here in WorldEditor and make a style for a button in this document, and I see what happens. And when I'm finished, I can just move that to the control template resource dictionary. So now I can just zoom in on one of these buttons like this and extract its template and edit it locally. So here I'll use apply to all, and then in the same document I can just edit the template or style actually for this button. Now it created 2 styles for us. One of them is a focus visual style, and that's just a dotted line that appears on top of the button when it has the keyboard focus. So we can press enter and it's the same as clicking on the button. And the only thing I have to change here is because it's using the default system colors, which is, well, black in this case on default, unless you have changed it in Windows settings yourself, but normally it's black. I want to use the whiter color, the font color for the editor. So I'll use this one. And I'm going to give the buttons a darker background as well, so that goes better with the lighter font color that we have. And, well, all these colors we are not going to use because we have our own. So first I'm going to change the background and the border brush for the button. The default background is just one color, and I want my buttons to have a subtle gradient towards a darker gray. So therefore I'm going to define a linear gradient brush, like so. So what I did here is tell the linear gradient brush that it should lay out the gradient vertically by going from 0 on the y-axis to 1 on the y-axis. So it tells it to go vertically and not from left to right or horizontally. And remember, we have these gray colors, which go from darker values to lighter values. So this 5 is, as you can see here, is a bit lighter. So it goes from the offset 0, which is the top part of the button, and goes to offset 1, which is the bottom of the button. And then it will go to gray color 4, which is just a bit darker. Now I'm going to do the same for the border as well. And then here I'll use a different shade of gray, of course, for it not to be the same as the background. And the foreground is just the font color. Okay, and then I'm going to set other properties that I want to be the default for all the buttons in the application. Next, I'm going to define what kind of shapes should be used in the button. Right now, it's just a border and a content presenter in it. So this text, for example, is displayed by this content presenter. And what I want to do is to have another border on top that will change the color of the button whenever we select it. So I need just another additional border, and that's it basically. I have a background border that is this gray background with a border. And on top of everything else, I have the content presenter. And in between, I have a border for when the button is selected. And right now, it has a transparent background. And I'll change the color of these borders in the control template triggers. So here I can define what happens when the button is defaulted, or I go over the button with a mouse, or whenever I press the button or the button is disabled. So I'll just remove all of these. First, when the button is defaulted or is pressed, I would like it to have the selected background color, which is this blue color. So now, for example, I can set this property temporarily to see what happens when the button is defaulted. And I can say, okay, when it is defaulted, then I want this border selected to have that selected background color. Now you can see that all buttons in the user interface are defaulted and have this blue background color. For some reason, it's not showing me here already. And whenever it's defaulted, I also want this blue color not to be just a blue color, but also have this gradient. So I'll let it be transparent towards the bottom of the button. So here in the control template, I'll just define a couple of more colors in the resources so I can reference those. So here I've got this gradient brush that I can use as a kind of masking for opacity of this selected border. Okay, now you can see that it's a bit darker towards the bottom, so that's good. And I want to have the same actually whenever the mouse is over the button or the button is pressed. But whenever the button is pressed, I want this foreground color, the font color, to be fully white, so it will be even brighter. And as the last trigger, I would like to have a darker, even darker color whenever this button is disabled. So if its enabled property is false, then I'll have a darker background color and a darker text color. For that, I need a couple of more linear gradient brushes here. And I'll just remove these colors just to avoid clashing my names, my key names with them. We don't need them anyway. Yeah, of course, I didn't put anything in the trigger for disabled buttons yet, so I'll just do that now. So for the foreground, the text color, I'll just use a disabled font brush. Whenever the button is pressed, I want the gradient to be reversed. Normally, when it's defaulted or I'm hovering with a mouse pointer over the button, then the blue color goes from lighter blue to a darker blue. And whenever I press the button, I want it to go from a darker blue to the lighter one. So we have this kind of subtle click effect. And therefore, I'm going to reverse this opacity brush for whenever the button is selected. So it's just basically a copy of this one, but with the offsets reversed. And then I'll use that one here. So instead of selected opacity brush, I'll just use the pressed. And of course, I need to change its name here as well. And then we are done with the button style. Let's see what it does. I should also put these away. Okay, so we have here a disabled button. You can see that it's darker. And whenever I go over a button with a mouse, it will become blue. And if I press it, then you can see it has this subtle click effect. All right. Now, one thing I notice is that our buttons now, especially on a darker background, they appear to be not really square or rectangular. They appear to be skew. And that's like a visual illusion because we are using a darker border color at the bottom and a lighter one on top. And that gives the illusion of the button being wider on top and a bit smaller at the bottom. You see it changes when I have the blue background. To fix this visual illusion, which is, of course, our buttons are still rectangular, right? So there's nothing wrong with it. And to fix that, I'll just change the border thickness of our buttons. And that should fix the problem. So here in border thickness, I can say, okay, I want to have, on top, I want to have a border thickness of 1. And on the left and right of the button, I want no border, basically, right? So now if we look at our buttons, they appear to be rectangular again, which is good. I'll put this new style for a button in the resource dictionary for control templates. Now you can see that it's applied even to the project browser window. We have these new buttons, and this one is defaulted, and this one is disabled. We can't press it, and you can clearly see that it's darker. So that's clear from the appearance of the buttons. Okay, now let's move on to the list box and list box items. Now I can do the same thing with a list box. I can just extract its template, like so. But the thing with the list box is that we also have to make a style for list box items, because the list box style only applies to the appearance of basically its background. For the items of the list box, we need to have a list box item style. But I really can't extract the style for the list box item in this way, because this selects the list box itself, and I can select the items to extract their template. So what I normally do is go to this location where Visual Studio is installed, and here is your flavor, which is the kind of Visual Studio that you have. For example, if you have the community version or a professional version. So if you go to this location, there is this file that defines the look of all WPF controls on Windows. So if you make an application, it will use these controls in this resource dictionary on default. And if you open it, you can see there's a resource dictionary and there is a style for everything, every control in WPF. Here I have a style for scroll bar, for example. And what I can do is just search for a listbox item and find it, and you can see there is a style for it. I can just copy and paste this to my file here. And there is a style for listbox as well, so we can even compare this to what we already have. I'll just change all the properties that I need to set to have a default look for all the ListBox items in the application. I left most of the properties for the ListBox item the same as they were, but I defined different triggers now. So whenever one of these items is selected, they all just have another background color, or they also have another color when I go over the items with a mouse pointer. And when they are disabled, or the ListBox doesn't have the focus, then they'll change colors as well. I can also already just change the style for the ListBox itself. So I'll just get rid of these colors. Here again, I left most of the properties as they were, but added a couple of new triggers to handle whenever I hover over the list box with a mouse pointer, or if the list box is active. So for example, here, if the list box hasn't got the focus and I go over it with a mouse, then it will have this blue border. I set the border thickness to 0 for now, because I don't want my list boxes to have a border. But whenever we use a border somewhere, so we set the border thickness to another value than 0, then this happens whenever we go over the list box with a mouse pointer. And I think this is enough to restyle all the list boxes. Well, we only have the list box in this open project view, but we already can see what happens. I think, yeah, it wouldn't pick the ListBoxItem style because I override it within this item container style. So what I do is to give the ListBoxItem style a name and then refer that whenever I want to use it. Now, because I override the style for ListBoxItem in this one, I can just say that it's based on my old ListBoxItem style, and it's changed. While I'm here, I want also to put something more in this open project description in the ListBoxItem. Okay, I played a bit with the font sizes and font types, and I think this looks okay. The thing is that the project path is cut off here at the end, but that's really the part that we want to see, right? Because the start of the path doesn't really matter. We want to see what the name of the project is in project directory. I'll have to fix that later on, but for now, I'll just use this and see how our list boxes look now. Okay, this looks nice. And then I have to move this style to the control template resource dictionary, so it will be applied to all the list boxes in the application. As we can see, this ListBox style is now applied everywhere, which is nice. I have to align these titles to be centered as well. And here you can see the ListBox for game entities has this a new style. There is this bug in WPF, I think, that whenever I select multiple items in the ListBox, then it will have this disabled color. And well, if you go back a couple of videos and look at the default style of the ListBox, then you can see that it happens there as well. So it's not something I just did. It's just like this all the time. And yeah, I would rather have this blue color for the multiple selections as well, but it doesn't really work right now. Maybe they'll fix it later on. All right. So next, I'll just go ahead and change the background for the history and log and have new buttons for different kind of look messages as well. First, I'll use this font type for project templates as well. That might be a bit too large, actually, so I'll just make it smaller. Yeah, that's better. Okay, let's go to the world editor. And then I can set the background for different part of the world editor here. Here I set different gray colors for the backgrounds of different parts of the world editor. And I gave this grid splitters a transparent background color, so they appear darker. So if we look at the level editor right now, and you can see these grid splitters like so. And here is one as well, but because we don't have anything here where the renderer, the graphics will be, we can't really see the grid splitter, but it's there. And unfortunately, restyling the tab control for WPF is a bit of work, actually. So I'll do that sometime when I'm making a docking manager for the interface. Then I'll restyle the tabs as well, because then I'll have to have new tab behavior anyway. For now, I'm just going to make new toggle buttons to use for these three, and then we'll be done with the initial design of the user interface. So I'm going to open the logger view here. And then I can define the look of these toggle buttons here locally. I'm not going to use them anywhere else, so I don't have to put them in this control templates resource dictionary. In this case, I don't need a focus visual style, so I just remove this and also all the colors. I'll set the focus visual style to null. So for these buttons, I just need a border within a border. There is no text or any other content. I just have colored borders. This is the initial style for our toggle buttons. Right now, you can't really see anything, but then I'll finish the style in the body of the control itself. I can move the event handlers for these toggle buttons to its style as well. So I can just use an event setter here and then attach it to that event handler. So I'm using the click event, and the handler therefore is, because I'm using the same handler for all three buttons, I can just move it to the style. And then I can just delete these here. And then I can set the background color of the buttons. It's not quite working, I see. I think there's something wrong with the triggers, because the way I was intending it to work is the buttons should become darker when they are not checked or they are not selected, because they are toggle buttons, right? So if you toggle them, they should become a bit darker, because I'm changing the opacity here to half the opacity. Okay, let's check why it is not working. So I'm using the background here in the outer border as well, and that will fill the whole button with that background color. To fix that problem, I just need to get rid of the background. And then it probably will work. Yeah. So now I unchecked the warning button and it became darker. I can uncheck all of them. Okay. So that looks nice. And one more thing I would like to do is to have a border here on top, so I can have a separation between the log messages and these buttons. Now I can just use a grid instead of a dock panel, and I move this part to the end of the file, so it ends up on top of everything else. So I put these buttons on a border and gave it a nice little drop shadow. And also now in our messages, we have this background. Whenever we go over the messages with the mouse, then we have a blue background. Okay, I changed the text block style in the logger view. So we have this font color now. Now I'm just going to fix these, the font color for the scene names, and then we'll call it a day for now. Okay, so today we finished restyling the user interface. Now we have everything in the colors that we like. At least I like these colors. If you don't like them, then feel free to just change the colors. I think for me this works for now. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you join me on Patreon, you'll get access to the code on GitHub, so you don't have to type everything over from the video. Plus, there are also other nice goodies and rewards exclusive to my Patreon supporters. Please use the link in the video description to check them out. I hope to see you next time. Until then, take care and happy game engineering!